Thank you everyone for coming, including the presenters and the participants. Yep. This session is session 5C on sustainability and built environment. I'm chairing this, and Emmanuel is the moderator. So we've worked very well. I don't know why they know they should be putting both of us together. So that's very good. So there will be three very powerful and interesting presentations here. I've kind of looked at it, and I know it's going to be very interesting. So the first one looks at a risk. The title is A Risk Framework for the Delivery of Long-Term Performance Through the Large-Scale Energy Focus Retrofitting of Housing. Yeah, by Seamus and Mark. And then the second one will be, the title is From Concept to Practice, Implementation of Circular Building as a Process of Translation by Martine and her colleagues. And then the final one is the Social Sustainability in Procurement of Construction Projects. This is a literature review from a Nigerian perspective, and this is by Joshua and John, and I know John is also here. So without further ado, I'll hand over I'll start the recording, sorry. Yeah.
Hello all, my name is Seamus Harrington, and I'm a member of the academic staff in the School of Surveying and Construction Management in the Technological University of Dublin, and I, along with my colleague Dr. Mark Mulville, sought to create a risk framework for the delivery of long-term performance through the large-scale, energy-focused retrofit of housing. So we set out to explore if and how the implementation, execution, and performance of retrofit strategies that utilize what we would consider a uniform approach to the retrofit of the decidedly non-uniform existing dwelling stock could create unintended consequences for the homeowner and indeed the home itself. So in an Irish context, we're talking about pre-2006 properties, and at what we're looking to retrofit, which is 500,000 homes, we're looking at roughly 33% of the entire housing stock pre-2006 in Ireland. So you can imagine the various housing typologies or typographies that exist throughout the country. And then we're trying to apply a uniform approach to retrofitting those, which we feel is a mistake and could cause quite a few unintended consequences that then become locked in and quite hard to change. So our research focused on the variation of outcomes that could result from current retrofit strategies and the cause of such variation. So as I mentioned, our climate action plan seeks to retrofit 500,000 existing homes. And this plan follows a Europe-wide approach to reduce energy consumption in a building sector that is responsible or represents 40% of total energy usage. So is to be applauded in principle. And most European countries have similar retrofit strategies that focus on the reduction of regulated energy. But for us, although it's not without merit, this does present a number of risks. And our paper demonstrates how issues related to indoor air quality, comfort and overheating may occur due to this narrow focus of the retrofit strategy on regulated energy and regulated energy only. We also established that the application of theoretical modeling, for example, in respect to the performance gap, can affect overall dwelling performance. Our research shows that there is many papers on the negative effects of indoor air quality and ventilation, on the effects of building fabric degradation and its relationship to air tightness, on potential increases in radon gas levels. There's not as many studies on these increases in radon levels in Ireland, but there is across the UK and across the continent. A lot of the studies in an Irish context have been theoretical models, But these theoretical models have shown that you could see an increase of up to 107% in internal radon gas levels in retrofit properties. So it's worth considering. And we also have risks associated with climate change as our summers get progressively hotter. Do we have enough or indeed any adaptive capacity built into our retrofit strategy model. So these issues could have significant health and well-being impacts on occupants and really do need to be taken into consideration. So the paper incorporated an exploration of the existing research as pertains to the risk factors identified through the literature. We followed that up then by a survey of leading experts in the field to identify and rank the highest risk factors emanating from this large-scale energy-focused retrofit of housing. So the survey was administered online, and we targeted experienced retrofit professionals in Ireland. So respondents were asked to note their overall and specific housing retrofit experience. So where exactly they were coming from. Were they architects? Were they building energy rating assessors? Were they specific retrofit engineers that work in the industry? They were asked to note their awareness of the potential risk factors associated with large-scale energy-focused dwelling retrofit and the likelihood in their experience then of this risk factor occurring and the magnitude of the impact should it occur. So firstly, as you can see from the table on the screen in front of you, the experienced retrofit professionals that responded to our survey are quite aware of the risk factors associated with large-scale energy-focused dwelling retrofit. So from our point of view, this is quite heartening. So if these individuals are going out specifying measures to be carried out within properties, at least they are aware of the potential risk factors that exist. However, then when you ask them, well, what is the likelihood of the risk occurring, and what is the impact should the risk occur? You can see there when we rate each of the risks that it's quite sobering. That they, for example, if we take from the screen below, we'll take the highest one, negative impact on indoor air quality. So this is a risk that does exist, and they do feel then that if it eventuates, this is extremely high risk for both the dwelling occupants. So that in itself is quite sobering. So if we consider these interdependent risk factors that present a risk in large-scale deep retrofit, we would consider first and foremost just taking the existing research that a policy framework created in respect to a specific requirement for mechanical ventilation in dwellings that have undergone or underwent low energy upgrade works. And if this framework regulates requirements in respect of regulating particulate matter levels, VOCs, CO2, humidity levels, and also if it regulates procedures for installation, operation, and maintenance of ventilation systems, then this can go some way to counteract or indeed mitigate a lot of the risks that we have explored and considered. So poor indoor air quality can be somewhat mitigated by an effective ventilation strategy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. I now invite
MVHR
questions
and
from
DCV
the
performance
audience.
over time can be mitigated by procedures for
I've also
installing, operating, and
upgraded you
and maintaining ventilation systems, etc.
So let me invite
We
you.
would note that the performance
Hold on.
gaps, pre-bound and rebound, should be considered as a risk that can affect the viability and therefore the success of Ireland's ambitious goal of retrofitting all these homes, 500,000 homes, by 2030.
Perfect.
And in respect to large-scale energy-focused dwelling
do you want to
retrofit, risks associated
join
with
us,
overheating,
as a
internal
presenter,
radon levels,
Chairman?
air tightness reduction time, and building fabric degradation over time all require further research in an Irish
So
context.
any questions from the audience?
So this
okay.
paper is part of an
John, yeah, go
ongoing
ahead.
research project that explores the risks.
Morning,
associated
Emmanuel,
with the
Chika, how are you?
retrofit of housing in
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very
causing
well.
narrow
Okay,
scope
cheers, guys.
from the reduction of
Seamus, morning.
energy. So we will now move on
A
to
nice
fieldwork
little
and
study.
assess dwellings that have previous
Just obviously, you made reference to it a few times. There are a number of issues to consider in this. One of them that you kept coming back to was the likes of the air indoor quality. Are you going to look at actually starting to look at specific and targeting issues, or are you looking at keeping it relatively broad?
No, I think, John, thanks for your question, and hello, everybody. I think we're going to, the study we have going into the fieldwork phase at the moment is going to go into existing retrofit homes. Okay, so homes have been retrofit since about 2017 and slightly earlier to very specific standards, so A-ring with an air tightness certificate and so on and so forth. And we're going to go in initially with a high-level study, and we're just going to put in the likes of air monitors, CO2 monitors, humidity level monitors. What I want to try and assess, first of all, is are the measures that we have put in place as part of the retrofit works, are they actually coping with the conditions that are specific to each particular home?
Yeah.
If you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, just from a starting point. With luck and hopefully all will be fine and all will be well. But if there are any issues that are occurring, and it could be dependent on maybe the amount of people that are living in the home, we might see much higher humidity levels in a 6-person household than we live in a 2-person household. Understand where I'm coming from? So we're just starting off at that exploratory level, and then we aim to take it from there.
Yeah, because I know there was a few studies done, and that was one of the big anomalies that kept, it kept skewing all the data. That one of the houses they were doing, like the occupants, it was, I think they used to leave for like 3 months of the year during the summer, etc., etc. So obviously CO2 levels would plummet, humidity would plummet, and it was skewing the data and stuff like that. Would there be a possible of using, or have you identified using, say, like a baseline for a property, or what are you going to try and measure against? You get me? Have you got like an exemplar project or something where you will get baseline figures, and from that you will then be able to pitch case studies against that baseline, or how are you going to look at something like that?
I suppose the consideration there is it's trying to find that property that we weren't sure would we be able to focus on one particular property that we could then take data from or extrapolate from. So what we try to do as a baseline of sorts is we have our participants at this stage and all meet the minimum criteria. They all received an A rating from the retrofit works. All have an air tightness certificate from that time. And to try and get a base across, we have 12 participants all over Ireland. Okay?
Oh, good.
So
just ask that.
Yeah. So try and get that base level of information that stems from the actual retrofit works as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, no, it'll be an interesting one, because the few studies that have been done in it are you get massive anomalies in the outputs, and some of it is very simple to explain, as the example I've given. Others, maybe there's a little bit more complexity to it. So the other kind of, would you have the option of doing a measure before and after? So before a retrofit versus after a retrofit, or is this something you're going to entertain?
Yeah, no, that's a further study that will get going towards the end of this year. So we have 6 properties lined up that we're going to go into for at least 2 seasons. So we're hoping for, say, winter and spring prior to retrofit works being carried out. Then we'll let the retrofit works be carried out, and then we'll go back in.
Go back in winter, spring again the following year and do a measure and see where they lie.
John, I'm mindful that you're
sorry, folks. I leave you to it. Seamus, thanks very much.
I'll bring Emmanuel in.
Yes. So, Seamus, I've got a quick question for you, and it kind of ties into what John was talking about. So, when people build in when people go in for retrofit projects, I have seen some in so there was a particular project in Brighton where they did retrofits when the government supported thermal comfort improvement for households. Now, there was a problem with that because then it made the walls non-breathable, so it started growing mold. Now, good idea to help people to get retrofit and get thermal comfort. However, these new approaches did not consider any further or future improvements. So then to fix the retrofit, it was more work. Now, these ones you're looking at, are there any possibilities or are there considerations of future improvements if we should, come up with new ideas? Do they consider those as part of their factors?
Not really at the moment. Okay, so a further study that a colleague of mine is working on is looking at creating a model that looks at the adaptive capacity of retrofit measures. A model that's twinned with a climate model like the one that's in the University of Southampton, for example. That we look over 2040, 2060, 2080, and then try and design a model of retrofit that allows that adaptive capacity to be built within it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you so much, Seamus, for that wonderful presentation and answering all the questions. So we go to our next presentation, which is from concept to practice, implementation of secular building as a process of translation by Martine.
Hello and welcome to the presentation of our joint paper from concept to practice implementation of circular building as a process of translation. This paper is a result of a collaborative work between Stefan Gottlieb and Andreas de Gier, built from Aalborg University in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Rickard Andersson and myself, Martine from Chalmers University of Technology and partially Aarhus University. The purpose of our paper is to document and analyze the gap between practices of waste management in the construction industry and the wider transformation which the sector is expected to undertake implementing circular principle. We start with a definition. The purpose of circular economy is to redefine growth, focusing on positive society-wide benefits by gradually decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources and designing waste out of the system. It has to be said that the circular economy principles are not systematically aligned or compatible with the sustainable goal that the company have been working with so far. So shifting from circular economy to circular economy require change in organization and work practices for the company. EU have identified in the Circular Economy Action Plan 5 focuses that they want the country to work with and the company to work with. One is to enable the reselling of construction material by updating the construction product regulation. In Sweden, for instance, the quality criteria to reuse recycled material is very demanding and very high. So most of the recycled material don't make it through the demand, so they are not reused. Of course, lowering the demand, the quality demand, would enable more material to be reused. They also want to introduce recycled content requirement for buildings, so that each building should have a part built on recycled content. They also want to promote circular design, focusing on improving durability and adaptability of buildings, integrate life cycle assessment in public procurement, and finally revise the material recovery target for excavated soils. All these, of course, have a cost, and the EU is aware that the production of building according to this new demand will be higher than the actual business as usual production, but they expect the businesses and the consumer to take over those costs. They will be the beneficiary of those new buildings on the long term. So in this content, businesses and consumer are seen as the key actor to drive the transition. In our paper, we compare two countries, Denmark and Sweden, which are usually portrayed as having similar life standard and similar attachment to the sustainable goal. They're also under the similar EU regulation. Both have developed a national strategy for sustainable construction, and both have proposed a combination of existing practices, optimizing of existing practices, and new initiatives which have not yet been tested as a solution to reach those circular economy principles. So what we do in this paper is to look at two large contractors, one in Denmark, one in Sweden, and see how they are working on integrating this concept. So the goal of our paper is to identify and analyze how the concept of circular buildings and circular economy are actually translated into practice, how these abstract concepts are becoming action or activities, and in these two large contractor company. To do that, we try to focus on which aspect of the concept are being kept, which one have been reshaped, and which one are being discarded. A long-term purpose of our research is also to identify if there are differences between the two countries in implementing circular economy, but this is the long-term purpose. But ultimately, what we try to contribute with is the diffusion of innovative practice in the construction sector. The theoretical frame we draw on for this paper is the translation as defined by Scandinavian institutionalism. So for once, it's not an actor network translation concept which is mobilized. This translation is defined in this context as the process in which ideas and models are adapted to local context as they travel across time and spaces. And this is done through a combination of institutional pressure, new regulation, new legislation, and stakeholder initiative, what the different actors are going to do in order to implement those changes. We also build on the concept of disembedding and re-embedding, which is part of this translation. The focus there is on why and how actors choose particular element, idea of the concept among the numerous options available, and how they translate that into their own context. This re-embedding is how the concept is reformulated within the context of the organization. And this reformulation can be either programmatic, so that it tried to implement all the aspects of the concept, and that would require a very deep organizational change and change in work practices and value and culture of the organization. Or this re-embedding can be done on using technical or operational element, something more down to earth, where you change a small practices, and maybe on the long term, actually, that could carry a radical change in the organization. But the technical operational element are much smaller incremental changes. The method is, we build on the result of two ongoing PhD. One, the Danish case, is Andreas' PhD, which is an industrial PhD, which means that he's in-house, being exposed daily to the saying and doing of the company. But Andreas have added 6 interviews for the purpose of this paper. The other one, done by Rickard, is a more traditional academic PhD, in a sense that the study is built on interview, and here we have selected 11 interviews which are linked to the specific company under focus as well as observation. They are both qualitative and interpretivist, and the focus on this paper is the narrative, new practice, and the role of agency in this translation. This is a chart presenting our result. I'm not going through that now because that would be too time-consuming, but what I want to underline here is that the two pillars of the concept, which is to redefine growth and decouple economic activity from the consumption of finite resources, are not mentioned in the two company, neither in the interview nor in the observation. But we have to recognize as well that all the interviewee do insist on the need for change. They do recognize that the actual situation is not sustainable and that change needs to be carried within the sector so that we reach a better balanced production of building. But it's not the same as trying to modify or reshape the organization toward the concept. So the discussion, which is a kind of summary of the chart we have seen before, as I said, the value and philosophy of circular economy did not make it through to those two companies, so we don't see any programmatic changes, large changes. We would require that the organization is changing its value and way of working. What we see instead is small and incremental initiative, focus on tool, LCA, energy consumption. What we see as well is optimization of actual practices. Waste handling are optimized, transportation is optimized. The two companies are trying to build on recycle by collecting old windows, doors, and other furnishing of the building that they hope will be reused in new building or renovation. But these are incremental initiatives. They are not fully implemented. Circular economy principle. What we see as well is that the Danish company has a specific translation in the sense that they build on their concept of lean. They have been implemented lean. This is an important concept in the company, and they use lean as a support to define their strategy and initiative related to circular economy. Another thing is that, according to the theory, managers are in charge of the translation, and of course it is important there to define who the managers are and what are the role. In what we have seen so far is that the environmental managers are in charge of translation, and the fact that they are not central in the both companies could actually explain for the lack of radical changes. So the conclusion, very quickly. Circular economy have acquired a moral legitimacy, but is not translated in the organization and very little in work practices so far. Changes are technical rather than programmatic. The future step of our study is, of course, to look at the multiple role of the translator. I mean, who are they and how they are working, and build further on the concept of translation. And on this, I thank you for your attention and welcome any question.
Chika, you're on mute.
Technology for you. Thank you, Martine, for that interesting presentation. I've invited you as a presenter, so if you can come on. Yeah, okay, fantastic. So I now open it to the floor for any question.
Can you open the chat? Before people jump in, if I could jump the queue.
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Martine, you pointed out that from a qualitative perspective and using interpretivism, I was wondering if there were any principles that were fundamentally the same as Sweden and Denmark, but the participants did not acknowledge it that way. So from your analysis, were there things you were identifying that these teams did not know they were doing across board?
I think we have to be careful because we have two companies in each side, which is not really representative of any national trend in that sense. I think we can see there is in both countries isomorphism, as the institutional theory would put it. They're all trying to keep their doors and windows and have a warehouse where they can stock the material, hoping that this is going to be reused. So far in both places we can see that in other company that it's a wishful thinking which is not taken. I mean, nobody wants really to have all doors and windows with asbestos to be put in their new building. So there is a lot there tension related to that. I think what we can see maybe is the lack of understanding of what circularity in both sides, right? That people are trying their best. People are aware of the needed change, but what it means in terms of work practices for them to adopt circularity is unclear. So this is similar in both sides. Yeah, so there is some isomorphism between those different companies, and also between the nation. But as I said, Andreas is I think Andreas is there. So if he wants to give something from the Swedish perspective, he can join us, of course. Started his PhD 6 months ago, so he's new in the field where Rickard is a long process. So we also need to adapt the information we have on both sides. But I think that the fact that this circular concept is not really clear, and it's difficult to get anything really circular in principle in those organizations, it seems to be very clear.
Okay, I've added Andreas to the presenter mode, so if he wants to contribute anything, he's more than likely encouraged to do so.
Martine, I do have 2 questions. On one of the things you're talking about with the PhD students, because it seems that both of them are doing this PhD at different times. So I was wondering how you reconciled what you're doing, or is this? Did they pose the same questions to those companies?
When Andreas can answer that, but when he started, we tried to align a bit, not with a questionnaire, because this is not what we're doing, but kind of having similar interest or kind of group of questions that we wanted to have. So that's a question maybe you can ask to Rickard, which is here, or Andreas as well. But we tried to have a balance from the two sides, and Rickard is not finished either with this PhD. So he's starting a new round of questions. So we can adapt on both sides.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned in terms of I think it was this Swedish one, you talked about more of action research. Did I get you correct? But I know you wrote interview 6 people. Was it more of action? You said.
Maybe Andreas can answer that. He's what is called an industrial PhD. So he's doing his PhD for a company. Andreas, do you want to answer that?
Andreas, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah.
He should be joining now.
Okay.
No.
Okay. While we're waiting for I have one other question. So I know this is, I understand this concept of circularity and the impact it's going to have on everything. And I think other industries like the manufacturing, they are way ahead of us in construction. But I think the problem I see in construction is the supply chain. In this, how much down to the supply chain? Because I'm guessing these are contractors. How did you link with the supply chain? Because it's one thing looking at this at that level, but most of the things are done at what you call the sub-level. So how much of this?
You're right, Chika. I mean, if we want to implement circularity, we need to change the way we relate to material and material flow. So that means the supply chain should be radically changed. And of course, what we see is those companies are not really ready to take any risk in that direction, right?
Yeah.
So we had 1 or 2 examples. One is with insulation. The other one is with plastic carpet and flooring, where actually what those companies do is that they come and pick up their material after use. So that they can recycle, because the plastic can be refunded and recycle, and the insulation can be reworked as well. So this is changing in a sense that they own the material which is in the building as long as it's there, and then they come up and pick it up, right? So that's an example of how circular economy could work. And of course, it's asking a lot of questions of who own what in terms of responsibility. And but they are offering their material with the service, right? But it has to be said as well that those 2 companies are doing that because they have their customer captive in that system, right? They expect them to rebuild with the material they are selling, and then have a long-term relation with the customer. So it's not because it's a successful business model which is make money. It is because they are trying to develop new value for their product and change the relation to customer. So I'm fully aware that the supply chain is very important. Here it was more about how within an organization, what you do with this concept, what you choose to take on board and what you choose not to take on board. So in this paper, we focus more on
So maybe Rickard is there what is the intention of this research? Is it to come up with some kind of a framework, or is it something that a recommendation? How do you take this forward? Because I think it's important that the industry in construction will start looking at this and seeing, because that will help the issue of some of the things we've been talking about, waste. We also been looking at for years.
I think it was interesting to make the comparison between the two types of organization, because I mean the concept of circular building is or circularity is quite broad, and to see how the different organizations is actually taking it within the organizations, and we see quite large differences between the two, but at the same time we see a lot of similarities, and from that you can see, okay, so what has this resulted in, and get a better understanding of that.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you so much. That was really very engaging, and I'll be reading the full paper because it's something I'm very interested in.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Thank you. Our next paper is on social sustainability in procurement of construction projects. So it's a literature review from a Nigerian perspective, and this is by Joshua and John. So I will start the presentation.
Welcome to this session of presentation at the 27th ARCOM conference and annual general meeting holding in Glasgow, Caledonia University. We are from the University of Limerick in Ireland. These are our names, and the title of our paper is Social Sustainability in Procurement of Construction Projects, a literature review from a Nigerian perspective. So this review is about two words, one why and a how. I said this presentation is about two words, one why and a how, as highlighted in blue. Now the two words, one why and a how, are intended to capture the purpose of this presentation and as well as the paper that was written. If you look at the symbolic depiction of these questions, you notice that the first word comes at the beginning and the second word at the end. And in between the two words is a why and the how. And equally, if you look at the depiction, it shows the words having light bulbs, meaning that it is expected that at the end of this presentation there will be some form of illumination and understanding of the paper as was presented. The why is meant to stimulate some thinking and, if possible, some interaction, some peer discussion. And then the how is supposed to tell us how we went about doing the paper. So let's look at the first word. The question asked here is, what is the purpose, or what is the work itself about? Well, the work is about procurement process, it's about social factors, it's about stakeholders, and as well as about sustainable development. The work is about looking at how the practice in Nigeria has fared so far in the procurement, whether it has been able to capture social factors in order to achieve sustainable development by the stakeholders during the procurement process. And the second question that was asked is, why is it so important that we carry out this study? Well, the reason for carrying out this study is basically because planning strategies normally tend to be more effective when they are considered and are inculcated at the inception of any project. From the very beginning, as you conceive the project, what planning strategies do you have in mind? If you have good planning strategies, then the aim, the objectives of those projects are achieved. So this procurement process that we're talking about, it has this, let's say, life cycle. It has the inception or the conception phase. It has the phase whereby there is an execution of what has been conceived. Then it has the after stage, whereby what has been said to be achieved has been achieved. And then sometimes the eventual disposal. So in all of these phases in the life cycle of the procurement process, the inception phase provides the best opportunity for sustainability objectives to be planned and included in any project in order to achieve stated objectives. Now, the third question we asked is, how did we go about it? We went about this by reviewing the literature, reviewing relevant books, relevant journal articles, publications, reviewing databases, all in an attempt to address the issue of social sustainability in procurement of construction projects. And like we said, we looked at it from the Nigerian perspective. So after this literature review, what did we uncover? Well, we uncovered that there was a dominance of the environmental as well as the economic aspect of sustainability over the social aspect. Now, this is an imbalance. And even as John Elkington put it, when you desire to achieve sustainable development, you shall as well desire to have a balance among the factors, among the dimensions, among those things that constitute sustainability, which is the environment, the economic as well as the societal aspect. So this imbalance was discovered. Like we said earlier, there was a critical review of the literature in the context of Nigeria, and these are the reference points for the review. So having conducted the review, what did we find out? As can be seen, we found three major revelations, and we tend to focus on these three major revelations as the paper contains. Now, these three revelations, not in any particular order, the first being that the Nigerian sustainability policies and procedures, even the practices, they do not align with the international best practices that is known to us. That was a very stark revelation. And secondly, there was an imbalance in the content of the policy instruments, meaning there was an absence of social sustainability, and of course, the imbalance in the triple bottom line. And then lastly, apart from all these revelations, the implementation of the existing policies were poor. They were very, very, very poor. So it's not enough that there's an imbalance in policy content or that the policies do not align with best practice. Even these faulty policies do not get to be implemented well. And this has an implication, actually two implications. The first being that there is a heightening of the barrier to the integration of social factors of sustainability by the stakeholders. Whatever the stakeholders intend to do to integrate social factors of sustainability, it wasn't possible anymore. The barriers have been heightened because of these two revelations. And then secondly, there is the failure, the stark failure to attain the globally accepted standard of assessment, like the one in the United Kingdom, which is BREEAM, and as well as the one in the United States of America, which is LEED. These are just two among other standard of assessments that have been globally accepted. So having seen these revelations and as well as the implications of the revelation, what next? The next thing to do is to be able to address the imbalance. And there's no better way than for the government to be the one that will lead, being the major sponsors of projects, being the ones that enforces the laws, being the ones that in the first place enact the laws and make policies. And then there is also the need to be able to better educate the stakeholders, and the practitioners, even by educating them better on sustainability and procurement issues. And then lastly, there's also the need to enforce at the lower level. If the government takes the lead by providing the best approach, then it's possible to be able to enforce it at the lower level. So we expect that in the future, we should be able to have research that will develop and enforce model-based implementation strategies on stakeholders, on designers, on constructors, and on clients in the industry. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you for that interesting presentation, which is on literature review. Because let me just quickly start off this by asking question, because you keep on saying critical review. Was this a critical review? What was it, or a systematic review? It's just.
It's okay. So Monday the 27th, or any day that week except the Thursday.
27th.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Yeah, I don't know if Joshua, he's just after he's texted me here. He's having issues in relation to getting online.
Okay.
Actually,
no, it was just based on a critical
after.
review. It wasn't systematic in that regard.
Because we haven't got the.
Emmanuel, I think we can hear you, Emmanuel.
We have enough blood bottles because of the national shortage.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay. Sorry, Chika. Yeah, no, look, it wasn't systematic in nature. We just took it as a critical viewpoint, purely looking at it on a global perspective, first of all, to see what was there. And then we tried to narrow it down to see, was there anything done from a Nigerian context on it? But that was somewhat limited. So that's why we took the broad context, and we tried where possible to use it as a method to align with the Nigerian perspective, which is, as Joshua alluded to there in one of his last slides, is somewhat limiting. And I wouldn't say it's unsurprising that they're behind, but Seamus there has a good point on it. What was the political appetite? And it is being driven by a government who are trying to align with best practice, but again, obviously with the likes of corruption, etc., and other stakeholders who maybe not so as invested in having a more sustainable approach to procurement. They're looking at it as a price-sensitive mechanism. Again, they somewhat can drive and skew the sustainable argument when it comes to procurement as well.
Okay. I'm guessing you've answered Seamus' question on political appetite.
Look, like everything, it's on the surface, it looks like, yes, this has been driven by government, by clients, etc., etc. But if you put two procurement projects side by side, one which is very sustainable and is 10% more, well, then suddenly that asks a very difficult question of a client, whether they are sustainably driven or not.
Welcome to this session of presentation at the 37th ARCOM conference.
Oh, sorry, apologies for that.
Okay.
Any more question? If not, I do have one more. I think the other thing I wanted to allude to was this idea of social sustainability, or even sustainability, as you term it. How do you define that in Nigerian context? Is it because it could be a different way of people look at sustainability?
Of course. Look, even outside the Nigerian perspective, the whole ethos behind sustainability is very subjective, and obviously then when you bring in the whole social side of it, it gets very subjective, and one's definition versus another, it depends on the actors involved in it. But yeah, the actual definition itself, there are numerous definitions used, but in the Nigerian context, there's no specific definition. So that is something that this research will try and tease out over the coming months.
Okay.
Can I also ask
yeah, Emmanuel, work away.
If you covered it, it's still fine. So this is building up towards, the final part of the research project.
This is just introduction to it.
Yes. Can I ask, I know it's not there yet, but what are some of the final goals that this research is looking at?
Yeah, ultimately we're looking at, obviously we want to look at a global perspective, maybe with a lens on, say, the UK, Australia, etc., where there's more, there's more of a sustainable viewpoint in relation to procurement, or so we say. And the whole ethos behind that then is to take best practice from that, and in the context of a Nigerian perspective, for the want of a better phrase, is to try and develop a framework or a flow chart in how best that one can be socially sustainable in their procurement when working in a Nigerian project or a Nigerian procurement route. And it's basically we're looking at best practice on a global perspective and see how best we can actually write that in and tie that in to the Nigerian economy.
Yeah, I guess you've picked up the follow-up question that was coming in there to say if you're going to find one that fits the context. So perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the whole look, and again, the real key we've seen even in the early stages of this is it's so subjective. Yeah. Even within the literature, we're finding, vast contradictions in the literature itself. So even just trying to tie that down alone is somewhat of a task. And then obviously then to apply that into a region which, for varying reasons, many of which are not their own fault, sustainability, doesn't come first and center in a lot of the procurement projects.
So just to chip in, I had 2 PhD projects that were both not construction. One was facilities management, and one was just from a social, societal point of view. And one was from Jos, which is central to the north. And that was completely different from the other one that was from the south. It was a complete split. So I know exactly what you mean by trying to make sure that it fits the right place. So
exactly. And again, obviously, it's a huge area, and the whole idea of even having geographical differences, north, south, east, and west, that will have to be considered in the study as well. And, again, even like with the UK, if you look at Scotland, England, Wales, you would have geographical differences as well. But no, that's something where it is a bridge we know we're going to have to cross. But again, we're going to see what the literature brings in relation to that, and then how best we can address it.
All right, good luck.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Just to add on that, I don't know whether that is not a missed opportunity, but maybe something that could happen here. If you're saying that there's a wide gap, so maybe is that not the case that this PhD, or is he a PhD or research?
PhD, yes.
Yes, should bring some of these things together, and hence my alluding to whether you've done a systematic review, because it would be good to conduct a systematic review to see where some of these things are. And maybe even if you're going to say, okay, this is what I want to follow because this is the true knowledge or true way of doing it, because it would be good if you're saying in Nigerian context, the knowledge is scattered or maybe there's contradiction. So it would be good to bring it together, but look forward, how you take it forward, you see.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it's something we will have to look at. And just again, when we're looking at it on a global perspective, we don't want to just focus on, say, the likes of the UK, etc., where there's a plethora of articles done on this, and the whole idea is to try and get a real global appreciation of where we are, because it in relation to sustainability, obviously it's been bandied about for a number of years now, but when it comes to the whole social side, particularly in procurement, research is lagging in that area. But no, Chika, a good point, and it is something that we will do, particularly towards the latter end of the literature review, where we can look at where is all this literature originating from.
Okay, there's a good point Collins made. I don't think it's a question. He said we've worked on
Patrick
we've project. Patrick Manu et al. Has published several papers which look at social-related issues on procurement of infrastructure projects in Nigeria. So you see, Joshua, that's one of the good things of coming to conference like ARCOM. Yeah, you definitely see where you get references of where people have done a lot of work in this area.
That's good. I'll jump on that. I'll talk to Patrick on that as well. I know Patrick has a good bit of work in that area as well.
Yeah, and also it will help. And Patrick is working or is in the same university with this guy in Manchester. I know he's left. He's worked with Collins, but he's with this guy in Manchester. They do a lot of seminars on infrastructure projects in Nigeria. I think it's a group. Yeah. So it might be something that Joshua might get in contact with them. Yeah, through Patrick or even through me, I can put them.
And Colin there is noted. Yeah, Colin, if you could even just pop me an email with the citations, that'd be great. I know Joshua's made reference to them, but there might be one or two we've missed. Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Chika.
Okay. If there's no other question, I'll bring this session to a close. Yeah. Thank you so much for the presenters. Yeah, we've had very interesting presentations and discussions. The first presenter, Seamus and Mark, they talked about a risk framework for the delivery of long-term performance through large-scale energy-focused retrofitting house. And they kind of demonstrated how issues related to indoor quality, comfort, and overheating may occur due to the narrow focus of housing retrofit on regulated energy. And it also went on to establish that the application of theoretical models can affect the dwelling performance. Our second presenter, Martine and colleagues, presented from concept to practice implementation of circular building as a process of translation from a Sweden and Danish context. They said they kind of looked at how circularity are translated into practice using two companies in two different countries. And obviously the discussion brought out a lot of things which they picked on. So well done for our presenters. And then the final one was on social sustainability in procurement of construction projects, a literature review from a Nigerian perspective by Joshua and John. Yeah, this looked at a critical review of different social sustainable procurement of work people have done. And as Joshua alluded, there were 4 questions, 2 whats, 1 why, and 1 how, if I remember. Yeah, but in their paper, they concluded by recommending the development of model-based recommendations that culminates in theories which will enforce implementation of strategy on stakeholders within a Nigerian context. Yeah, so thank you so much for all our presenters, and thank you for the attendees. Yeah, I hope you gained a lot from this valuable information, especially Joshua, who's got links to papers that he can review for his PhD. Thank you also for to the moderator, Emmanuel, able moderator, and thank you everyone for coming.